Well, hey there, I see you subscribed to my channel. Thank you for doing that. I'm Nick Shell with Family Friendly Daddy Blog. Now that you're new to this channel, I'll tell you a few things about me. We get to learn each other a little bit more. I was born and raised in Fort Payne, Alabama. Definitely, part of my heritage, guns. You gotta have a gun rack on your truck. And you never know when you might see that buck right there. You just, and then you got yourself some dinner. What I do for fun, watch any game really, but definitely college football is what I'm into the most. Roll Tide, and NFL, it's all right, but I'd watch Saving Them Boys anytime, and NASCAR is all right too. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Nick Shell from Fort Payne, Alabama, and cut. All right, so basically the first full minute of this video was me playing a character of what a lot of people assume that a man from Alabama should sound like and the things that he should be into. I did that to play into the preconceived ideas that a lot of people have about a region that they're not actually that familiar with. Now, here's something I've learned in making all these videos on my channel. I've learned that it's important and necessary that we understand the different cultures of different parts of the nation or different parts of the world. That's important. We want to respect the culture and understand, here's how these people think, here's how these people think. That's important. What happens is, in learning a culture, we often end up believing that the stereotype is the norm and that's most people. Obviously, if you connected with that character I played in the first minute of this video and thought, oh yeah, that is what someone should be like if they're from Alabama, I'm sure there are people who would own up to that word for word. They're like, yeah, that sounds like what somebody should be like if they're from Alabama. Why is it though that just like that my accent went back to normal? For one thing, now you no longer hear the thick southern accent. And by the way, yeah, I'm not into shooting things out of my truck. I don't even own a truck. I have a Honda Element, and I don't hunt because I'm a vegan. That'd be pointless. I'm not into sports. I'm not into watching NASCAR. I don't really watch sport. I guess I make videos for people to watch, but I don't really sit down and have hours to watch. Just not my thing. But I think I was just trying to think off of my top of my head, what are some masculine stereotypes people have about the South, and that's where that came from. So why is it though that I am not that character that you heard in the first minute? How is it that I'm in the fringes of what it means to be from Alabama? Why am I not that stereotype? So now in reality, I'll let you learn a little bit about me. So it's true, I was born and raised in Fort Payne, Alabama. If you look that up on the map, you'll see that it's at the top of the state of Alabama, near the Georgia and Alabama border. If you look it up on a regional map, you'll see that it's the very bottom, the very end of what's called the Appalachian region of America. Not to be confused with the Deep South. I'm not from the Deep South. I'm from Alabama, but that one part in Alabama that at the top is not the Deep South. It's Appalachia in that northeast corner of Alabama. So I grew up on a mountain. I grew up a couple miles away from a state park called DeSoto State Park. I grew up on a mountain next to waterfalls, canyons, and rivers. That's what I think of when I think of Alabama, because that's how I grew up. In fact, this video channel is an extension of my blog, familyfriendlydaddyblog.com. If you want to catch a glimpse of when I think of Alabama, go on my blog and search hiking with my dad on his 61st birthday. So there's a blog post I did. I took lots of pictures. It's me, my dad, my son. We're going on a hike. That I did it a few months ago. That would be, in my mind, what Alabama is really like. That's my version and my perception of Alabama, growing up in the Appalachian region on top of a mountain next to a state park, being in Cub Scouts. I was never really into sports. I cared more about being outside and going on trails, and I still do. And as far as a pickup truck, not so much. I would prefer a Jeep Wrangler if I could get my hands on one. Instead, I have a 2004 Honda Element that gets me from place to place. As far as my accent, I'm not denying that you can, if you listen carefully, you know what to listen for, you can hear a Southern accent. Especially people from California, they can instantly know that I'm from the South. But a lot of people from the eastern part of the United States assume that I'm from Ohio or something. That's the default state that people assume I'm from when they hear me speak. Why is it then that I don't sound like the character in the beginning of this video. I would attribute that to a few things, but mainly my mom, who's from Buffalo, New York. She was born and raised there and moved to Alabama when she was a teenager. I believe she was 15 years old when she moved to Alabama. Granted, you've probably seen her in other videos I've done. You'll probably hear a thick Southern accent. But somehow in the process of growing up with her as my mom, there were certain words that were pronounced differently. Like I remember when I was in second grade, compound was one of the words on my spelling test. Like compound word, right? Compound. And so she was helping me study and she said compound. I said, no, it's compound. So like I grew up hearing certain words pronounced a different way. I think subconsciously it made me aware that accents exist at a younger age. So that by the time I was a teenager, the Southern accent that I had, I was too aware of accents, and I somehow connected with that more neutral accent that I heard on Saved by the Bell, I suppose, is what happened. It was never a conscious decision. It was not like, let me deny my Southern accent, because again, you probably, for some of you, you hear it loud and clear, even now, others not so much. So I think that definitely had a difference too. Even just the fact that my mom is from so far up there north, and me growing up in kind of the Appalachian part of Alabama, next to a town called Mentone, which is very crafty and artsy and liberal, actually. So I was exposed to different cultures, different things. And I mean, this may not sound like a big deal, but imagine being in Alabama, being raised by a mom who noticeably was ethnically different looking than most moms, because my mom arguably is half Mexican, half Italian. Of course, the DNA test showed that the Italian, not so much, it's more Middle Eastern Jewish than anything. But culturally, at least, Italian and Mexican American. And of course, it was her grandparents that were born in Italy and Mexico. But even that, it added enough diversity to where during the holidays, when I looked at who came over for a Christmas, for Thanksgiving, for birthdays, I didn't look around and see people of just lighter complexion and just look like the typical American. I had very dark grandparents and they actually had accents. My grandmother, my Mexican grandma, was from Buffalo, born and raised in Buffalo, and then my Italian grandfather, born and raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin, near Chicago. So I grew up with grandparents who I was very close to, who had northern accents. So even that watered it down too. And just that culture. I mean, I can still see hints of a Jewish mindset in my grandfather. It was undeniable that I saw that, the way he thought, the way he talked. And so being exposed to that and being around him so much, it wasn't necessarily the same experience for other males growing up in Alabama. I was exposed, I feel, to a subtle amount of diversity my whole life, to where by the time I was an adult, it was too late. That's already who I was. And I kind of saw the world a little bit different. And sure enough, once I graduated high school, I left Alabama, and I wanted to be around more diverse places. I traveled the world, I spent 2 summers teaching in Thailand. Then I went to Korea, Trinidad, Tobago, New Zealand, Ecuador. I wanted to get out and see what else was out there. And even now, I mean, I've lived over a decade of my life here, most recently here in Tennessee. I'm still in the South, but now I'm near Nashville, which again, it's that crossroads, that cultural crossroads where there's so many different ethnicities and cultures and viewpoints here. And I feel everyone gets along just fine. So in conclusion, it's true. I was born and raised in Fort Payne, Alabama, but I was very close to my grandparents that were from Buffalo, New York and Kenosha, Wisconsin. My mom moved from Buffalo when she was a teenager. And then just growing up in the mountains and the Appalachian region, the outdoorsy, woodsy kind of stuff in the state parks, that to me is what Alabama is. But that's the top of Alabama. The top of Alabama is Appalachian, which is different than the Deep South. So check that out. There you go. So there's a little bit more about me. It explains how I can be the way I am and still be born and raised in Alabama, and even now live in Tennessee. The stereotypes that we see, that we're presented with what somebody from the South should sound like and act like, are not always accurate. Granted, I'm not 100% Southerner either, right? If my mom moved and my grandparents were from the north, then I guess maybe that's what we can understand about this, is even though I was born and raised in Alabama, culturally, as an American, I'm not 100% Southern. I'd have to do the math to figure out how Southern I am. But while I definitely identify as a Southerner, a lot of my culture really belongs to the Midwest and to upstate New York. What are your thoughts on that? I think it's pretty interesting now that I've said it out loud. And by the way, could you help me out and subscribe? If I don't have 1,000 subscribers by February 20th, they won't let me make money from this channel. This is half of my YouTube income that I provide for my family as a stay-at-home dad. That would really help me out. YouTube changed the rules. And remember, also on February 20th, you can see me on TV on the Lifetime Network on This Time Next Year when my episode premieres, where I try to find my doppelganger. No, that's not me. That's the guy I'm trying to find.